He's got one foot in the frying pan and one in the pressure cooker. Believe me, as a bowler, I know that right about now, your bladder feels like an overstuffed vacuum cleaner bag, and your butt is kind of like an about to explode bratwurst.
Hey, you mind? I wasn't talking when you were bowling.
Was I talking out loud?
Welcome to Munsons at the Movies. My name is Kyle. I'll once again be your host. Joined by the rest of the Munsons, want to give them a wide berth.
It's what is called a born loser. A real Munson.
And talk a little bit about what's going on in other worlds. This time we will start with Aubrey.
I had a whole thing planned of all of these great, wonderful updates. But really, it's just, I'm hoping that this conversation ends before I get blown away in a hurricane. We're prepping for another hurricane, category 5 now.
Milton.
As I'm speaking.
Oh, no.
It's the joys of living in Florida. That's where my mind is at.
Because you got lucky with the last one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I was just off. Didn't do anything.
I'm sorry you're dealing with that. It's not fun.
It's literally par for the course down here.
I'm glad Doug Jones wasn't in a bunch of disaster flicks that we didn't have to dance around any sensitive subjects tonight. So we're ready to go.
He would play a great hurricane.
All right, Case, how about you?
I'm excited for our annual Halloween episode, and I just happened to be listening to a radio show today, and they were interviewing Damien Leone from the Terrifier series. The subject came up: what horror movie villains are on your Mount Rushmore? And the host said, it's conceivable that Art the Clown might end up on some people's Rushmores. And I think that's a really cool concept. And I'd love to hear your guys'. Mine would be Mike Myers, obviously Jason, Leatherface, and probably Ghostface would be my horror Mount Rushmore. And I'd love to hear your guys'.
No Freddy, huh?
I don't know, Freddy from me.
Gotta be Jason and Mike Myers. And then obviously I go the Sharks from Deep Blue Sea.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's going backwards. They're smart. They're intelligent. It's nothing more terrifying than that.
That being said, I'm shocked you didn't just go straight Jaws shark, Deep Blue Sea shark, Under Paris shark. Like, I thought you'd go with the Mount Rushmore sharks.
Well, see, like, I wanted to be fair to all of the other great horror movie villains, but like,
that's fair.
If I'm going to choose one, I'm going to choose the ones that have had their brains genetically altered to be smarter than humans. At least LL Cool J.
A real good point.
I'd say Pennywise is an incredible horror movie villain.
Yep.
And Tom Brady from 80 for Brady. He's up there and most terrifying.
Hey, it's only a matter of time until Brady for 80 or whatever that is. It's a franchise, and he is a villain. It's only a matter of time.
He's already the villain. Let's be honest. I got it for just pure pop culture relevance, and Chucky's got to have some consideration up there. I know he's not the most imposing physical figure you've ever seen in horror movie history, but
recognizable.
Considering how many offshoots and shows and like pop culture, that's up there.
I'm a big fan.
For me, it's the big three are Freddy, Jason, Michael, but I honestly need about 15 in there. Pinhead would be up there.
Oh, yeah.
Leatherface would be up there.
James, what about you?
Dealing with some hand, foot, and mouth disease over here, which is somehow not as bad as the sports teams I'm rooting for. Poor little girl won't stop screaming, so I'm going to be bouncing in and out. I'm screaming internally as I watch my Jets fall apart.
Well, in my world, I'm becoming accustomed as of the past 12 hours, in case we'll know this, to having to change my resume to say East Texas A&M University. Apparently that's going to be a thing here shortly instead of Texas A&M Commerce.
All right.
So they still need approval in November, but it's no longer going to be University of Texas at Commerce at Dallas or whatever the hell they were trying to do it.
That's exciting.
Resolution is exciting. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited to welcome back Stephanie Malone of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast to the show. She joins us every Halloween. She's the founder and editor-in-chief of morbidlybeautiful.com, a website dedicated to indie horror and genre entertainment, including movies, video games, books, comics, art, television, and more. She's also the co-host of several podcasts, including Cheer and Loathing, Guilty Pleasures, and Untold Horrors. She pays the bills by working as a professional graphic designer, copywriter, and creative marketing director. Her other passions include writing, producing indie films, and sharing her love of films as a film journalist and Rotten Tomatoes approved critic. Ooh. She's super active on Instagram, and you can find her at SR Greenhaw. Can confirm that account has been popping the last couple of weeks with content, and she was here with us the last 3 times for Jamie Lee Curtis, Nev Campbell, and Max von Sydow. and we're happy to have her back. Welcome back, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Those are 3 of our best episodes, too.
Yeah, you guys picked some good ones. Those were fun to talk about.
Well,
Remember, the wheel decides. We don't decide those things.
yeah, there you go.
That's very important. Very important to note there.
Okay, well, the wheel is doing
There you go.
some great work.
If you pay the wheel will do your bidding. That is what we've learned over time.
Ooh. I took a little break from podcasting, so it's super great to be back, especially on this show. It reminds me how much fun it is and how much I absolutely love it and have missed it. Morbidly Beautiful's crazy busy this time of year, obviously. We've been covering a lot of film fests. I've been doing a ton of movie reviewing.
And I imagine lots of watching Doug Jones walk around in a costume for the past couple of weeks, too.
That's like all the time for me, but
That's good. Well, that's why you're here.
yeah.
That's why we bring you back. So
That's right.
you always have phenomenal reviews. It's so informative, and looking forward to edition number 4. So let's rock and let's roll. Birthday is October 17th. This is our Halloween episode because it's the closest to October 31st. And so we've got 3 birthdays to talk about today. All 3 are live. I did double check this. They are all still living humans. But of all episodes to not have a dead guy, I feel like Halloween would be the one, but here we are. So anyways, first one up, we have Barry Keoghan, known for films like The Killing of a Sacred Deer, Saltburn, Banshees of Inisherin, Green Knight, Chernobyl, American Animals, and Dunkirk. How old is Barry Keoghan?
I don't know. He looks young to me. I don't know. Can't really tell. 31.
Most recently was seen on screen humping a pile of dirt.
Oh, 32 then.
I wouldn't say most recently. That's not how that movie ended.
I'm curious how does that like automatically mean 32?
It's a life experience, yeah.
Learning so much.
You know what? Hell yeah. I think James is onto something. 32.
Yeah, I feel like he sounds like he really knows what he's talking about and he's been there, so hesitant to argue.
Oh,
I'm not. 27.
Ooh.
okay. So we got 3 32s and a 27.
Pushing back against my theory here.
Aubrey, you should have followed because he's turned 32.
Hell yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, boy, James.
I push back against my theory. I try to say a white guy looks younger than he actually is. Never again.
Hey, you've been right far more than you've been wrong, so I'd stick with your theory.
Well, I've got a couple more white guys for you here, Aubrey, so we can see how well you test the waters with these ones. Second up, we have J.C. McKenzie, character actor you know from projects like Trial of the Chicago 7, The Hunt, Irishman, Molly's Game, Wolf of Wall Street, Departed, Aviator, and tons of popular TV shows. JC's been in a ton of stuff. How old is JC?
I don't recognize this person.
Oh, I've never seen this man before.
I've seen him, but not really.
He's very prolific, just in supporting roles.
55.
Aubrey's doing math based on the age of the projects. I like this. That's nice.
65.
Go 58 from me.
No, I changed this. 60. I don't like that. I don't like being the youngest one. 60.
All of you are over, so I'm going to give you another chance to guess.
Ooh.
55.
No shit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who this man is. I'm going based off of gifts. 50.
You know, 76 was the best year ever. So he's 48.
Okay, well, he turns 54, so you're correct. You win this one.
Oh, man.
All right, last one. We've got the star of 8 Mile, Eminem, Marshall Mathers, Bunny Rabbit, also in Funny People in the Wash, but mostly 8 Mile. How old is Marshall Mathers?
I'm going to go 44.
55.
I'm going to go 50 again.
52.
Marshall Mathers is turning 52, so Stephanie went the last moment.
Oh, on the button.
Nailed it.
Happy birthday to those 3. Anybody else with a birthday on October 17th? We are here on episode 108, and being our Halloween episode, we had 4 other Halloween-centric actors that we threw on the wheel. A couple of these have been around since the first time. This is our 5th ever Halloween episode. Those names that have been on since the start are Bruce Campbell and Tony Todd. Otherwise, over the years, we've since added Sarah Michelle Gellar and Brad Dourif, but it doesn't matter. At least for this year, those 4 will go back on the wheel for 2025's Halloween episode. The wheel did select Doug Jones, who has 187 credits on his resume, 1 producer credit, 4 soundtrack, and has done over 90 commercials in his career that we know about.
That we know of. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he had done at least 30 commercials before his first major role as well. So that's where he started in the business for sure. But before we get into the minutia, the details of this man's very fascinating career as a creature on screen, we always start with a little actor trivia to see if James can stump us Fast and Furious style.
You guys are part of the initiated. You know the game here. But for those of you listening at home, I'm going to read off 3 facts, 2 of which are going to be true about Doug Jones, one of which is not going to be true about him, but is going to be true about one of the many illustrious cast members of the Fast and Furious franchise. Everyone here is going to have to guess which one's not true. Fact number 1. Had a song written about his life by a gothic rock singer, which has over 1 million streams and downloads since it was released. Fact number 2. Is an avid fan of Dungeons & Dragons and has been playing the game his entire life, so much so that he even wrote the foreword for a book about the game and talks about how it's influenced the creativity of his career as an actor. Fact number 3. He was his college mascot and was a member of a miming group called Mimes Over Matter.
The reason I started laughing, because I know the answer. The lie is number 2. The Dungeons and Dragons group, and that's clearly about his co-star from the movie Doom, The Rock. We all know he's an avid D&D player.
I got full of surprises. He might actually be an avid D&D player. That might be real. Just for differentiation's sake, because it's going to make me laugh either way, I'm going to go with 3, because I thought it was 2, then I heard 3. 3's obviously Tyrese.
Tyrese was mine. Yeah. See, I like where you're going, Aubrey, but I think a funnier mime 100% is Jason Statham, the guy with the iconic Hackney voice.
Yes.
Just imagine him not using that voice in a physical role where he can't punch somebody. That's hilarious.
That's so funny.
I'm paying good money for that.
If he went into a miming role, he might be up for an Academy Award.
Pretty sure number 3 is true because I know he was a mime and he played a mime on In Living Color. I would totally write a goth rock song about him. So that seems true. So I'm going to go with number 2 as being false.
All great answers. Actually, all 3 are about Tyrese. So you guys were... No, I'm just kidding. So...
Did I show up to the wrong episode? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, this is finally get to honor a man.
What horror movie was he in? Fast and Furious? The second one?
He was in a horror movie, I bet, at some point.
Yeah, for sure. There's got to be one in there.
Wasn't he in Legion?
Yes, he was.
There you go.
Fact number 1, had a song written about his life by a gothic rock singer, has over 1 million streams and downloads since it was released, is true. The song's called The Devil and Mr. Jones, and it was written by a singer-songwriter named Aurelio Voltaire. And I listened to it, and it is like, actually, it's got a lot of depth to it and it kind of bangs. I was impressed. It's about how the devil has given him all the riches he could ever want and has honored his art and his creativity, but no one will ever know who he is because he has to wear a mask to work every day. Ooh. And it's like the love you crave you'll never get, but you'll get the admiration. And I was like, damn, that's fucking deep. Like, that's pretty deep for a gothic rock song. And Doug Jones says he loves it. He's like, I'm honored that Aurelio wrote this, and he's even showed up to some of his performances. But I was like, that is not what I expected from a song like this. So it was like really deep about, hey, you're famous, but you're not famous. And like, that's the curse you have to live with. I'm like, oof, heavy stuff. Fact number 3, he was his school's mascot in college and was a member of a miming group called Mimes Over Matter. That is true. He went to Ball State University here in Indiana, not too far from me.
Sure.
Yeah. He was Charlie the Cardinal. He actually met his wife when he was the mascot, and she thought it was like a joke that he was telling her. He's like, no, I'm literally the bird. Like, that's me. You see at the basketball game. She's like, oh, that's kind of funny. We'll see where this goes. And they've been together for 20 plus years at this point. And he was also in the campus troupe Mime Over Matter. And he said it was just kind of fun for him because he's 6'3", 140 pounds, and he wanted to be like a comedy actor. And this was a way for him to learn how to use his body and contort himself in weird ways. And lo and behold, his entire career starts stemming from something he joined for fun. Fact number 2, avid Dungeons and Dragons fan, been playing the game his entire life, even wrote a foreword for a book. You guys are pretty much on it. That's not actually about Doug Jones. Well, Doug Jones is known best for horror and fantasy genres. You know, he plays monsters, ghosts, supernatural beings. go-to actor for these roles. It's actually Vin Diesel, who's an avid Dungeons and Dragons fan, and he wrote the foreword to the book about the game and has talked about it. It's influenced his creativity as an actor for roles like Dominic Toretto in the Fast and the Furious franchise. He's an enigma, that man, but he is.
Yes, he is.
He is the pinnacle of the Fast and Furious franchise for sure.
That sounds like a joke.
It's how you make a franchise with 10 movies. You need creativity that D&D can only give you.
Is this the second actor we've had that somebody has written a song about them? We had You Cannot Kill
David
Arquette, and now we have this one. Is there another one?
Stephen Tobolowsky's life story was written by, not life story, him being able to like see energies was written by David Byrne because they talked about it on set one time, and that's how they came up with Radiohead, remember?
Yeah, all within a bunch too here within the last couple episodes.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thanks, James.
Mhm.
All right, Case, what do we got for a snapshot in box office?
This is a particularly tough one because can safely say that I have never once said, oh, have you guys heard about the new Doug Jones movie that's out? I don't think he drives a lot of box office, not because of his abilities, just because no one really knows who he is. Pretty circumstantial data, but nonetheless good to go through. He's 60th in largest budget, 48th in average budget, which was higher than I thought it was going to be because he has a lot of smaller budgeted horror movies, obviously. Other numbers, he's 65th in total box office, 59th in Star Meter, and he recently experienced a big spike with a movie he has out right now, 73rd in Critic rank. Sometimes I just hate reading some of these because he's 106th in a fan ranking.
No.
Take it or leave it. 78th and 57th in different box office metrics. Averages him out at 92.
Out of 108.
Yeah, and there's two specific movies worth talking about in his scope here. The first one is actually the 12th worst performing movie we have had all time, and that is Monkeybone, which had a $75 million budget and world grossed $7.6 million. Unfortunately, he also had two other movies that are right in James's wheelhouse. Super Capers, world grossed $31,000. That was outdone drastically by Absentia in 2011, which world grossed $9,000. So James could have gone to work on his automobile selections, but between the two of those movies, $40,000, you're going to be able to get a pretty nice car.
This all doesn't really shock me all that much. I'm almost surprised it's not even like lower. That's not the career that he's had.
Correct.
Which I feel like will be a theme. Like, he's singular. His career is very singular. I don't have anyone that I've been able to compare him to. So this kind of stuff all that panned out for me and checked out perfectly.
Have our comparative metrics, but then I have a spreadsheet that ranks everybody on every metric we keep, and he is actually 92nd on both of them. That leads me to believe that's a pretty accurate score when comparing him to the other actors we've looked at.
There are only so many of those roles out there, especially good roles out there in that kind of space. So a lot of them are B films that people haven't seen or only cult folks know about, and he's kind of set up for failure from the start with the box office side.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Case. It's a good start.
You bet.
We'll see where that Munson Meter lands. 92nd out of 108. We're going to say first major role is 1997, pre-97, the early life stuff from Doug Jones. I sent a photo to the group chat. I did a little guerrilla research a couple weeks ago. I drove past his high school here in Indianapolis, Bishop Chatard. And by drove past it, I mean I drive past it almost every day, either on my way to work or over to Broad Ripple or whatever it happens to be. I play baseball at Bishop Chatard usually once a month during the summers. Very nice private school with a really nice turf baseball field. Apparently, they take credit for all of his accomplishments there. I didn't go inside, though. I didn't get a chance to walk in Bishop Chatard. They're kind of tough about letting people into their doors.
Probably a nationally renowned mime program.
So he's an Indianapolis kid. We haven't had somebody from this area since Adam Driver that we've covered. So, which that was a pretty cool one too, because he worked at a Target somewhere, and I'm like, which Target? I'm interested. Give me the dates. So he's born in 60. Born and raised here. Huge fan of pop culture growing up as a kid. Then he went to Ball State. After Ball State, he joined the miming crew, and that's when he got really interested in this concept of acting. And so he started his career doing advertisements as Mac Tonight in the 1980s. I think we mentioned off screen on this one, but by the time he started to get into films, he had already done 30 different commercial campaigns and has done around 90 or so 90 plus in his career. So he said in his interviews that he's like, I went because eventually he moved out to LA with his wife in 1985. The idea was to do the sitcom thing. A guy that could stretch like crazy and throw his legs over his head and do all sorts of crazy stuff like that, but doing commercials, doing TV shows.
There was a lot of slapstick comedy in sitcoms in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
That lines up with what I remember the TV landscape being that time.
3 years after the move to LA, he had his first role in a movie called The Newlydeads. He played Tim in 1988. The Newlydeads, just a fun name. That's just a fantastic name of a picture. He did an episode of In Living Color in 91, and Stephanie, you said he mimed in that, correct?
He did.
Putting his skills to the test. And there's so much other stuff during this time we're not mentioning that he's just like, he's grinding, right? He's grinding to get parts like any actor is, telling his agent, like, give me jobs, right? Like, get me in the door. He recognized early on, he's like, I'm not the heartthrob leading man look and body type. And so I think he knew early on that that's not the kind of role he's probably going to attract. He's not going to be the Leo DiCaprio in a Titanic or something like that. So you got to find a different niche.
Do you think when he was working on that episode of In Living Color, Jim Carrey was just sitting over there staring at him going, God, why can't I do all that stuff? Maybe he inspired Jim Carrey and he never once told anybody.
I don't know.
I'm surprised he didn't end up on In Living Color more.
Yeah.
Just on like little bit parts.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about a lot at that point. It's like he had a really long neck and he felt like people either always commented on it or it like just held him back from doing things he wanted to do until he had met some like creature makeup people and they're like, that's actually a benefit for this type of world. And he's like, holy shit, you're right. I can use that to my advantage. And although his roles aren't huge in a lot of movies, he's in a lot of big pictures over the years. So like Batman Returns, 92, he plays Thin Clown, one of the clowns doing the penguin thing. So it's not huge, but you can notice him in that film.
Mm-hmm.
93, I mean, you could say that Hocus Pocus was his first major role. There's a limited amount of screen time on that one, but Billy Butcherson is a character that has stayed in pop culture over the years. It's, Hocus Pocus has had enough of a cult following to garner a sequel for 3 or 4 decades later.
It's pretty memorable, I think,
for
us nerdy horror fans especially.
Mm-hmm.
He's in it a decent amount. Like, I didn't remember because I didn't know who he was when I watched this movie, so rewatching it, I was a little surprised at how much he is in it. Outside of the main characters, he's kind of the first, like, supporting person that you kind of think of. And it's very physical.
His first word stood out to me on screen. I was like, oh, because especially later in his career, he doesn't always get chances to actually speak dialogue. He's just kind of the guy who creepily walks along. He kind of stands out when he finally gets a chance to speak some dialogue.
Scene where moths come out of his mouth and he was talking about how that was all practical. Like these days that would be CGI, but they did it for real. I was like, damn, that's pretty cool.
How did they do that with practical effects?
I don't know.
You find someone who really wants a job.
In the most least surprising note of all time, he was in an episode of Tales from the Crypt. I would be honestly mad at him if he was never in an episode of Tales from the Crypt. TBH.
Yeah.
And he played a contortionist.
Surprising character, too. Yeah, contortionist.
That show was so big, man, back in the day. That seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I only respect appearances in Tales from the Hood. So Tales from the Crypt is great, but Tales from the Hood significantly better. So
then you're a big Keith David guy because he got some bonus points for Tales from the Hood too. What a wild movie that is. That's some crazy shit. All right, an episode of Unsolved Mysteries in 94.
How funny would it be if the story he was in dealt with mimes and somehow they tied that into an unsolved mystery?
All right, now I'm just going to Google it. Unsolved Mysteries. Doug Jones. Robert Stack.
Robert Stack, that's right. There you go.
His voice was so good for that show. Okay, well, let's get into what we're calling his first major role, and I think it's an interesting one, too, because he plays a Rue, and that's his role as Yi in Warriors of Virtue. I just want the listening audience to know Aubrey negotiated to give this review, so I think he's very excited to talk about it.
So, well, if we're going to tell the story, let's tell the whole story. I was manipulated into this because a fear of mine was exposed and preyed upon, and I had no choice because I wasn't going to watch Ouija, Origin of Evil. The only way out of it was this.
Yep.
This movie's not terrible. It's a 1997 movie. It stars no one. There's no one starring in this movie that you need to know of. But it's about a young boy who falls down sewer, not dissimilar to Gary Oldman in Dark Knight Rises, but instead of getting pulled out by Joseph Gordon-Levitt, which I think everyone would prefer, this kid wakes up in this mystical land of creatures and kung fu kangaroos. I made it through about an hour and 10 minutes of this movie. I didn't hate it. My review of it is fine. For a 1997 movie that's made for families and children, it's fine. And it's no worse than like most of the stuff that you're watching at that time. I think it's just a matter of if you got to this one or not. And so me getting to it as a 37-year-old man, it's not the right time because I'm never going to be into this at this point without nostalgia. But it's no worse from like a science fiction point, a production design standpoint. It's no different from like Power Rangers or anything like that. It's just, the quality is relatively the same. So it's just which odd creature do you feel like looking at? When you see the kangaroos doing kung fu, it's weird because it's kangaroos, but then you go, well, how weird is that different than giant turtles?
No.
It's not really, outside of the fact that these kangaroos look terrifying. The Doug Jones of it all is like the Doug Jones experience I had throughout this entire time. I spent a lot of time up front making sure I knew who his character was, so I would be able to identify him. I identified him only for me to find out shortly after he's identified that I'm never going to hear him talk.
Yi is a very silent Rue in this movie.
They say he doesn't talk, which I guess should have been my cue that he was going to talk. You know, the physicality of what he's doing is fine. It depends on like how much of the actual like kung fu stuff he's doing, I would say, would really be the judge of like how good or bad he's doing at the thing. But I mean, he's doing a fairly decent job. If I was like, 8 years old, I'd be into it.
Mm-hmm.
Warriors of Virtue. I enjoyed it way more than I would have enjoyed Ouija.
That's good. I was obsessed with this movie when I was a kid, so I watched a lot of Warriors of Virtue once upon a time. But what's so interesting about watching this so many years later is you hear Guillermo del Toro, which we'll talk about a lot here in his partnership with Doug Jones. And when he talks about Doug Jones, he says like Doug Jones is, according to Guillermo, he says Doug is not great at physical roles, stuff that requires you to like do really like battle fights, throwing stuff around. He's been much better at like being the creepy guy who like crawls across the floor and is more subtle. And Yi is a very physical martial arts character. And so I watched it and I was like, Doug Jones is under there? Really? I'd seen that interview. And so I'm watching this to figure out, like, did I miss the fact that this Rue is actually really bad at fighting? It wasn't too bad. He has like a metal ring that he uses to hit people with and he throws it off stuff. So it's like the least imposing weapon of all time. But
Aubrey, the real question is, did this inspire you to watch Warriors of Virtue 2, Return to Tao?
Is that a real thing?
It is.
Yeah, it sure is.
Oh, I didn't know that.
As such an ardent fan, Kyle, how did you not see the sequel? You loved this movie as a kid.
Not enough, I guess.
If Kyle's not going to watch the sequel, I'm not going to watch the sequel.
Well, I guess I'm not going to either.
Darn. But we'll move on to some other roles here between 98 and 2004. First and foremost, we have Mimic, played a character named Long John, a really creepy looking bug, alongside F. Murray Abraham in 1997.
This is where he met Guillermo del Toro and formed their really amazing partnership.
Mm-hmm.
They called him in at the last minute and asked him to do some reshoots, and he thought he was only going to be there for like a day, and then they asked him to stay for another couple of days, and then they pretty much just fell in love with each other, and that began their illustrious career together.
I found it really fascinating to hear them like tell the story of Guillermo del Toro is at this point an up-and-coming name in Hollywood, and you're just like, a side actor. I do contortions, and I want to wear costumes. And Guillermo del Toro was like, well, tell me every movie you've ever been in costume in. And he's like, and he started naming them. And del Toro immediately was like, I know the makeup artist on that, makeup artist on that. And he's like, and now I realize he was like checking my resume. Essentially, I trust all of those people, so I trust you in this role. It's like, and then we just kind of fanboyed out for hours about like our favorite monster movie stuff. And then he's like, yeah, this guy's like one of us. He's like, I felt immediately like he embraced me as like, I'm in the in crowd. I know these people and he has the same likes as me. And lo and behold, it ends up entirely changing his career.
Well, over the next couple of years, I mean, it just a lot of TV shows that are big TV shows. I don't know if you call the Weird Al show a big TV show, but he played a contortionist in that. Contortionist number 2 was big. The Weird Al show big in the late 90s case?
Yes.
I mean, I know Weird Al was huge.
Yeah, not like Saturday Night Live big.
I know Doug said that at this time, like his relationships with makeup designers and folks like that is what really allowed him to get referrals to go into other projects. So It was just like work with somebody, they recommend you. Work with somebody else, they recommend you. And that's kind of what led him to getting more and more of these.
Which I have noticed he is an incredibly nice person. And so I would imagine being good at what you do and being a nice person helped him drastically in those circles.
It almost seems fishy how nice he is.
Yes.
In a world of actors who are super divas and have ego, he seems like the most gracious person ever.
It's probably from necessity, though. Like,
It has to.
I mean, I'm sure he's like actually a nice person, because that's a hard thing to fake over the course of 30 years or whatever. But it's also out of necessity, because he's not the type of actor, at least from the way his career's panned out, where there's margin for error. You can't get badmouthed by somebody.
Yeah.
There's only one person going for this role. Like, we need this person.
Kyle, to go off your point, he also mentioned that like a lot of times people mistake his politeness or his professionalism for comparing him to the average like diva actor. He's like, it's like people are just like really caught off guard that I show up on time and do what I'm paid to do. And everyone's like, whoa, this guy is just, what a showman, true professional. He's like,
He's an actor's actor.
What a pro.
yeah, he's like, you paid me to be here at 5 a.m. and sit in a chair for 6 hours to get makeup on. He's like, so I did that. And everyone's like blown away that I did it. They're like, oh my God, what a gentleman.
To add to the nice guy mystique there too, he talked about his one big regret in his career is that he would have stood up more for his value early in his career. And so I think people probably mistook him being nice for, oh, we can pay this guy the least amount possible to do the jobs.
Yeah, that's fair. Where it's like, I just need a job. And they're like, cool, we'll give you $1,000. He's like, oh my God, $1,000? That's amazing. They're like, we were budgeted for 20, but we knew we could get this guy like to start because, yeah.
I don't know that he has a lot of peers in Hollywood at this point.
No.
He's doing things differently than anybody else can. It would be tough for him to get his worth. There's no peers to compare against.
It's like selling your house and you got to look at the market nearby and you're like, oh, what are comparative homes going for? You don't have that.
Yeah.
This is a great point. How do you agent for someone like this?
What's your market value?
Yeah.
Who was the last guy that played Bug number 2? Like, it's
You get them whatever jobs you can, right? Like, oh, they need somebody. That seems fair. You compare to the last price you gave. That's the only comparison.
Yeah.
It's interesting. That's what's so cool about his career and studying it is built his own path based on a necessity. And it's in a niche that was needed, but without any real understanding of what the market value would. So he played some aliens in The Outer Limits. Obviously another big show there in 98. 3 episodes of that. Episode of Kenan and Kel from 98. So 2 very different worlds.
the biggest show of all the shows you mentioned.
Huge. I mean, Kenan and Kel and all that.
Illustrious.
Those 2 together on what Saturday nights was like the thing to watch when you were a kid.
Never heard of it.
Mystery Men, he played Pencilhead, one of the few times you've seen him not, I mean, he's in a costume, but not a creature costume. He plays one of the hopeful superheroes, if you remember that scene when they're outside interviewing superheroes.
I enjoyed Mystery Men. I don't remember Doug Jones in there, so I'll just say I remember being entertained by it, and I enjoyed Paul Rubin's character.
He was barely in it, right? For like a second. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of shocking that we've never covered that in the 108 episodes until now with all the actors that are in that movie. But
At that time, I don't think superhero movies were a big deal, but somehow they were able to do like a spoof version. Somebody had a bowling ball superhero skill or something, and it was a fun take on what wasn't a giant genre at that point.
you know why he probably got in that movie too? Because he was on Kenan and Kel, and guess who else was in Mystery Men? Kel Mitchell.
There you go.
That's right, he was.
Played the Invisible Boy or whatever it was.
What we have discovered is this is the most important role of his career.
I remember Kel's power was he was invisible when no one was watching. That's
All right, 3 Kings. He played Dead Iraqi Soldier, 99.
Calling card. I mean, this is just probably the performance of his career.
your delivery
yeah.
and the whole thing makes it sound like it's not real.
You know how hard it is to hold your breath for at least a minute plus with a camera hold? It's hard, man. Legitimate.
It's one of those things where like when you say it out loud like that, it's kind of funny, but like I bet at the time someone was insulted, but then they saw the role and they're like, I don't know, maybe we just let him have it. It's like,
I like this movie a great deal, so I'm not even taking a dig at the movie. I enjoy every George Clooney movie that isn't like a romantic, fun-loving film. Dusk Till Dawn is George Clooney's best movie, period. Best role, best movie, everything. So I love 3 Kings. And wasn't Cube in this too?
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a good movie.
I don't share your affinity for this movie, Case.
That's all right.
I've seen it twice, and I've gone to war over this movie. Pun not intended, even though my students would argue that. And it's just one of those where I've watched it a couple times, and I just get to the end, and I'm like, I don't really get it. But like this one doesn't work for me. And really, it's probably the Doug Jones of it all. He just doesn't get there. I need him to really get there, and he doesn't.
Yeah, I think if he'd have been in it longer as a dead person, I think it would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
So 99 Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he played Gentleman in an episode.
You guys, okay. He was in Hush, which is one of, if not the most iconic episode of the entire series.
Oh.
Are you guys not Buffy fans? I might flip out here.
Have at it.
I've always wanted to be.
You need to be. You really should.
I just missed it. I missed the cutoff when I was younger. It was a little bit above me. And then I never circled back because, Charmed came on after it. And that's what time I woke up to go to school.
Charmed is a good choice. It's not as good as Buffy, but it's pretty close second.
Yeah, what was his character in this?
I don't know how I'm going to be able to describe this if you haven't seen it. You should Google a picture of it because it's iconic, just the imagery of it. But he doesn't talk. The whole episode, it's called Hush because there's no dialogue. It's just, he's incredibly creepy. He's got this creepy, smile.
Oh, God.
Oh.
I would say just watch that episode, even if you're not a Buffy fan. It's iconic. It's incredible. He's phenomenal. They make action figures out of this guy. Like, this is a big deal.
There's a Funko Pop of this character.
Yeah.
Wow, that's pop culture significance right there.
Yeah.
I have an action figure of him.
They put this on cable television?
I'm thinking about changing my Mount Rushmore now and having Hush as the final head on the mountain. This is creepy.
I think that's fair. That'll be your homework after this episode is to go watch just that episode.
I'm in.
And then report back.
I'm scared now, like currently.
It's creepy as hell. Well, and this is when Buffy was like in its kind of cheesy era, like it was sort of like goosebumpy, silly. And then this episode dropped and people were like, oh shit, like it got real fast.
Not even a joke. There's 4 Funko Pops from Buffy. It's Buffy, Angel, Spike, the Gentleman.
The Gentleman.
So it's the 3 main characters and him.
See, I told you guys, it's big time. Big time.
That's crazy.
I already added a point to my Munson Meter score for pop culture relevance, just for that.
And there are multiple YouTube reaction videos to his character.
Why we bring on Stephanie for moments like this.
Yeah.
To sift through the 187 and find the gems that we couldn't find.
That is a good catch, though.
That's great.
Yeah, it's my biggest contribution to the podcast.
We're going to get to your review in a bit, so come on now. Before we get to the Millennium, Smash Mouth, the All-Star video, Pencilhead, his character from Misty Men, was also in that, combined in the Smash Mouth universe. And then after the Millennium, Monkeybone, that box office bomb that Case mentioned earlier, he played a Yeti in that film. Forgettable Yeti, sounds like, given how bad that movie went. Men in Black 2, he played Joey in 2002, another movie we haven't covered in 108 episodes, which is kind of surprising. One of the aliens.
I looked up his character, and I do remember his character, and it did make me chuckle when I saw the picture of it. But yeah, definitely going to play an alien.
Alien or agent? 50-50 there.
Fair point.
That movie is really bad.
Yeah.
2002, he was in Adaptation, played Augustus alongside Stephen Tobolowsky, a movie we just talked about a couple episodes back. Played a space alien in Stuck on You in 2003 alongside Seymour Cassell, another alien, a lot of aliens in the filmography.
He's just building his resume and his repertoire to start moving into supernatural characters. At some point, he's going to expand the range, but he's not there yet. A lot of aliens thus far.
I would kill to play an alien in a Hollywood film, so shout out to him.
Hell yes.
Oh yeah.
What this tells me is that Hollywood will find a way to typecast you.
Because they don't want to pay him more.
You're an alien. We're not sure if you can play supernatural character yet.
That's true, though. I mean, he said in interviews that in the negotiating table, they would be like, well, they don't see his face. Right, it's just him beyond makeup. We'll pay him at X rate. So there's a point to be made there.
Every role that he's done so far, I would love to do if I didn't have to sit in a makeup chair for 5 hours.
Or 7 hours like they did the first time he got into the makeup for Hellboy as Abe in 2004.
What a transition. That was professional.
That was silky.
108 episodes in. I learned that he's been dubbed over 3 times in his career. This was the first time it happened.
Yes.
David Hyde Pierce.
David Hyde Pierce, that's right.
So this is actually points that I'm going to give to him for his ability to act later on when we talk about Pan's Labyrinth. But this was my first time watching Hellboy.
Oh.
Yeah, this was one of those movies that I wrote off really quickly when I was younger.
Fair.
I think I was 17 when this came out, and I was just like, oh, no, this ain't for me. I never really circled back to it. I like this movie quite a bit. This movie's good. I get it now. I get why everybody likes this. This is a good, clever, smart, interesting movie all the way around. His performance, I think, is interesting. I wish I would have seen more of his character. It was an interesting dynamic to the group that they're giving you, especially put up to some of the other characters who aren't as interesting. I really wanted to see more of what he was doing. And the physicality of what he does is really interesting because in this world, in the worlds that Guillermo creates, those are the things that are more interesting to me. Not that Selma Blair was bad, but in comparison to Selma Blair, who's just being a regular person, it's what Doug Jones is doing is far more interesting.
Did you see Hellboy 2?
No, I didn't get to that one yet. I definitely will watch it now.
His character has a much wider arc and much more focal point of that story, and he gets to actually use a speaking voice in that, so you get to see a lot more of him there.
That's something to look forward to, because I will be watching that.
So good.
Good sequel.
When it comes to him being dubbed over, he's like, to this day, I've still not actually met David Hyde Pierce. He's like, but if I did, I would kiss him right on the cheek because of how highly he's spoken of me, despite us never actually interacting with each other. So much so that David Hyde Pierce refused to take credit because he felt that Abe was entirely Doug's creation. He sat down to dub and he saw the performance and heard the voice and like stood up. He's like, what am I even doing here? Like, why? He didn't owe me that, you know, like he didn't have to do that. A lot of times when people are getting paid to dub over, they just come in and read the lines. And when he saw his performance, he was like had to essentially be forced into dubbing this and didn't take the credit for it. He's like, so to this day, he's like, I feel kind of like David Hyde Pierce has helped me get more on the map.
It's crazy because the studio demanded the dub because they needed a name and they didn't think Doug Jones could draw. But then like David Hyde Pierce won't take the credit. So it didn't even do him any good to have him dub because they couldn't promote it.
It's wild because I haven't thought of David Hyde Pierce since 2004. Clearly, Doug Jones, I feel like, has had much more of a long-lasting impact in Hollywood than David Hyde Pierce. So
it's just refreshing to hear of like a good guy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know this guy anything, but he's clearly killing this role. So like, what am I even here for?
He's just phenomenal in the way he commands this character and the mannerisms of it. Like,
yeah,
you got to think like the talent it requires to sell a fish man to you. I know there's a lot of other creatures in this world, but like particular niche, and he nails it, I think.
Great.
Isn't this Guillermo del Toro as well?
Yeah.
Is this his first fish role?
Yes, yes.
With him, so maybe we're just kind of planting the seeds there, and
First of 3, my friend.
May end up with an Oscar. Let's go. It's happening. It's starting to happen for our boy.
Well, Case, talk to us a little bit about our largest audience gap, which is the remake of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari from 2005.
I feel like Kyle goes out of his way to give me really weird films that he's just got this little group. And they think it's funny to make us watch shit that they know we're not going to like. Cabinet of Dr. Caligari is a 2005 American horror film directed by David Lee Fisher. And I got really excited about this because this is actually the remake of a 1920 silent film of the same name. The fact that silent film can work its way into our podcast is terribly exciting to me, and I'm really glad to review a movie that was based on a silent film. The plot in this movie is exactly the same as the original. So much that a lot of critics and a lot of reviews of this movie said, hey, just save yourself the time and just watch the original because it's probably better, which I thought was hilarious because it's a silent film in the 2000s. This carny, he travels, he ends up in this small town, and he gets a tent and he's presenting an exhibition, and it's Doug Jones' character. He plays a character that can basically predict your future, and if it's ominous, you'll die. So in the opening scene, he comes out of his trance and this guy says, "What's my fate?" Or "When am I going to die?" or something along that lines. And he said, "You're going to die tomorrow at dawn." And as it turns out, the guy dies at dawn. And then there's this murder investigation, and everybody thinks it's Jasari. He's spoken for, so he has an alibi. The doctor has all this stuff, and then they end up arresting somebody else who they actually think did kill him. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought the tension was held very well, and mainly because of Doug Jones's ability to communicate through emotions and through body language, and he did really, really good in this role, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. I shouldn't need to say spoiler on a story that came out in 1920, to make sure I'm following internet protocol. Spoiler alert, the main character who's telling the story is basically in an insane asylum. All the characters of this are there, and he's like, yep. I guess I'm crazy. So the best part about it, 76 minutes.
It is such a short movie.
And it goes. The pacing's really good.
It was better than I thought it would be after the first scene when I saw how low production value the scenes were.
Yep.
But I will give them credit. They do a good job of making it feel like it's a 1920s film without it feeling terribly hokey.
Yeah. If you haven't watched it, go watch it.
Actually didn't even realize they had remade this. So I saw it on the list and was like, holy shit. I love the original. I mean, I went to film school, so this is like Film Nerd 101. And I think that this was pretty enjoyable. It's made to look almost identical to the original. So I thought they did a really good job recreating. I think that's what a lot of people's problem with it is that it does just feel like the original. They don't really modernize it in any way, so it loses a lot of its audience.
Yeah.
But I love the story, and I thought the performances were great, and Doug Jones was especially good in it.
I felt really lucky that of all the movies we've talked about so far, this is easily the one that he's had the most noticeable impact on.
It had been 80 years since the original. I felt like it was due for a remake.
The only thing I know about this movie is that it is one of, not this movie, but the original, is one of Nicolas Cage's favorite movies of all time.
That's high praise.
So speaking of low budget, I almost forgot about something very important. At some point, just didn't put it on the show notes. Right about the time of the millennium, Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Killer Snowman. Aubrey, I gotta know, did you watch it? And what the fuck?
So Jack Frost 2 was the first movie I watched in preparation for this.
Yeah.
I have seen the original Jack Frost. I think this is probably a fair time to explain why I have a really strong, like, cheesy horror run. And because my mom used to work at Hollywood Video when I was in high school.
Cool.
I would just be able to get movies all the time. And I just kind of went through the horror section. So I've seen some of the worst horror movies of all time. However, I've not seen the great ones. I don't know what happened there.
Okay.
They're checked out. You get the rest.
Yeah, Pinocchio's Revenge. I saw one movie where these high school students were making some kind of time capsule and then created this monster that then came alive to kill them. And Jack Frost is one of the movies I've seen. Jack Frost 2 I had not seen. It's the only movie I think of all the ones I watched where I got to see Doug Jones's face and hear him talk.
Yeah, one scene.
Because he dies on the raft, right?
Sure does. Dies on the raft.
Which is a wild scene. I will say I didn't finish this movie. Not because I hated it, but because my son was out of the house with my wife and they came back. And then I just never made my way back to it because I had other stuff going on. If you like B horror and really stupid,
Club Dread style humor.
Yeah, it reminded me of Bad Chucky. The bad Chucky movies, where the killer is saying all these one-liners and stupid things, then this is it. Well, I'll finish this movie. I think it's a very enjoyable time for a movie that is absolutely atrocious.
Terrible. Some of the worst effects I've ever seen.
Yep. And logic. Some of the worst logic I've ever seen.
Do you know what happens when your one antidote stops working? You got to figure out something new. The antifreeze no longer will take out Jack Frost. If you're looking for a chance to rewatch it, you might want to do that on your own because we're never going to stumble upon another actor that's in Jack Frost 2, Revenge of the Killer Snowman.
You say that, but I would have said that before we got to this episode.
That's true.
So he was in Doom. He played Dr. Carmack Imp in 2005. Speaking of The Rock, it's a movie about monsters, so it would make sense that Doug Jones is in that.
Doug Jones actually plays all the imps. That's the one Doom fact I had.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we already got him here. We might as well just knock out a couple of these bad boys.
Put him to work. Criminal Minds. He did 2 episodes of that between 2005 and 2008. Big show there in the 2000s.
That he actually plays 2 different characters, so the value of him not being known allows him to play a different character. In the first episode in season 1, he was like a drug addict murderer. But the one that made me laugh is in season 4, he plays a captain of a fight club. I don't see it, but I wish I remembered it.
You could have said, go ahead and guess, and none of us would have ever guessed the captain of a fight club.
Man.
Not a chance. Well, speaking of beating up 8th graders, Benchwarmers, he played number 7 Robot in 2006. A movie not known for being good, but a movie that is known in baseball circles for I Am 12. No spotting Doug Jones as the robot in Benchwarmers.
First robot he's ever played. We're starting to build some range. Aliens, robots, Fight club captains,
Bugs.
drug addicts, bugs. I mean, it's coming, guys.
I feel like every other phrase sounds sarcastic.
I'm not. I'm being serious.
All that sarcasm to lead into a role where he plays multiple characters and is super cool and fun to watch. So it's gonna be interesting, and that's our highest critic score, which is Pan's Labyrinth. And Stephanie, as our guest Munson, has the review.
So I kind of lost my mind when I found out that this was the film I get to talk about, because it is one of my all-time favorites, and I consider it an absolute cinematic masterpiece. I think this film is flawless. Set in post-Civil War Spain in 1944, Pan's Labyrinth interweaves a dark fantasy with harsh historical realities, creating a story that is both richly allegorical and deeply human. Its thematic complexity, stunning visual design, masterful storytelling, and compelling performances elevate it to the status of a modern classic. At its core, Pan's Labyrinth is a film about the intersection of fantasy and reality, where the innocence of childhood imagination collides with the brutalities of war. The story revolves around 11-year-old Ophelia, who encounters a magical labyrinth and is thrust into a world of mythical creatures. This fantasy world serves as both a coping mechanism and a refuge from the cruelty of the fascist regime led by her monstrous stepfather, Captain Vidal. What makes this film extraordinary is how Del Toro balances these two worlds. The fantasy elements are not merely escapism. They mirror the horrors of war, offering a haunting commentary on the human condition. The faun, the pale man, and other creatures Ophelia encounters serve as metaphors for the moral choices and sacrifices that define real-world conflicts. By using fantasy to explore themes of power, resistance, innocence, and sacrifice, the film achieves a layered narrative that resonates on multiple levels. The cinematographer won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography for his work on this film, and rightfully so. The visuals are a masterclass in contrast. The cold, muted tones of the real world juxtapose the warm, rich colors of the fantasy world. This contrast not only highlights the divide between Ophelia's harsh reality and her escapist fantasy, but also serves to immerse the viewer in both worlds. Del Toro's creature designs are equally remarkable, particularly the Pale Man, portrayed by Doug Jones, one of the most disturbing and iconic monsters in modern cinema. The labyrinth itself is an ancient symbol representing the journey of self-discovery, moral choices, and the path to enlightenment. Ophelia's tasks, given to her by the Faun, also played by Jones, are fraught with moral ambiguity, emphasizing the harsh realities of choice and consequence in a world filled with both literal and figurative monsters. The film also draws heavily on Spanish folklore and history. The Faun, for example, has roots in Greek and Roman mythology, but is reinterpreted through the lens of Spanish culture, embodying both menace and guidance. The performances are remarkable across the board. Jones, in particular, leverages his impressive physicality to bring both grace and terror to the film's fantastical creatures. Del Toro's vision is uncompromising and deeply personal. He's often spoken about his fascination with fairy tales and the power they have to reflect our darkest truths. The ambiguity of the film's ending, whether Ophelia's fantasy world was real or a figment of her imagination, masterfully allows for a rich spectrum of emotional responses. Some may see the ending as a tragic loss, while others can find it deeply uplifting, suggesting that the innocence and purity of the soul can transcend even the most horrific realities. Ultimately, Pan's Labyrinth remains one of the most profound, deeply affecting, and visually arresting films of the 21st century.
Case loves when you do your reviews. He's just like,
Yes.
he's always in awe. He loves it.
I'm a fan of
too.
storytelling, so when I hear people telling a good story, I just love to hear it.
I just know how much time and energy you put into that and how well you articulate it. It's just really cool to see.
Oh, thank you.
Incredible.
I think I saw that he stood on stilts, like 3-foot stilts for this.
Yeah, the behind the scenes of this is crazy, like what he had to go through, especially for the Faun.
Well, and it's all dubbed over, right? Because I guess he had told Guillermo's like, you can do whatever you want. You can cut to 10 for all I care. But Doug was like, I don't want to treat my co-star like that. So I'm still going to learn and read Spanish that's on the page, but have no clue what I'm saying.
Yeah, he learned it all phonetically and did the whole performance in Spanish, even though he doesn't speak a lick of it.
That's hard.
It's crazy. And I think it was like pretty good. I think they just, got somebody who understood the dialect a little bit more.
What I saw was it was similar to the Hellboy thing. He was so good that the person that did the dubbing was like praising him for how easy his job was to do that. And from what I saw, he also learned Spanish to be able, he learned Ophelia's lines also. So he would know when naturally to speak back to her when she was saying stuff, which is insane.
Dude's awesome.
Of all the creature creepy roles like Pan's Labyrinth, I feel like is it. Top of the mountain, top of the heap.
100%.
Of like, if you're going to be someone who's known for inhabiting the skin of creatures who just like creep out the viewer and make you like, ooh, this is it right here. And two characters that do that uniquely.
I feel like if this was all he ever did in his entire career, I would still be like, yeah, he's an icon.
Right.
Like, this is enough for me.
This was a first time watch for me.
Oh, what'd you think?
And I would like to bring back everyone's favorite game.
Uh-oh.
Of which beloved movie did Aubrey watch and dislike? I'm joking. I love this movie. This was one of those.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those that like you watch and it reminds you why you love movies so much.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to use very like maybe hyperbolic words, but I swooned watching this movie. I thought about it nonstop when it was over. I was like happy and smiling. And it's because I really enjoy and appreciate watching brilliance. It's just an absolute masterpiece. It's the rare movie that is better than it was presented to me. And it was presented to me as one of the best movies I'll ever see. And it's in that category. If I made a list of my 5 like favorite movies that I've watched while doing this podcast, this is probably on that list. The Doug Jones of it is remarkable. For him to be able to do this in Spanish, and like, it's the rare time that I wouldn't be mad. I'm not mad that he's dubbed over, because I think with the way that the movie's working, that person needs to sound the way it sounds and all that kind of stuff. But
the voice is great.
Yeah.
The voice is great for it.
But what he's doing physically is just, it's so captivating.
Mm-hmm.
It's as soon as you see him, it's like shock and awe, a little bit of fear, and a ton of intrigue. This movie it's just shot to the top of my list of movies that I'm like, I want to tell everybody I've seen, even though everyone's already seen it. And anyone who hasn't seen them, I want to make them watch it and then watch them watch it. Like, this movie is incredible. I was already a fan of Guillermo. I never really considered myself that because I hadn't seen this. And it's just, I think he's absolutely brilliant for being able to create stuff like this.
I'm reading here that he emailed Jones and said that no one else can play this part but you.
Yeah.
So did he write this role for Doug Jones?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so cool. Hey, that's an honor.
And that's one of the things that just kind of shows up in Guillermo's work all the time, is there's a very clear and distinct vision. It's got to be this person because I need it to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a brilliant performance. It's the type of thing, like, I walked out of this movie and I thought a lot about the Andy Serkis Planet of the Apes stuff, only in the sense of like, when Planet of the Apes trilogy was over, everyone was like, Andy Serkis should be winning awards. I was like, this is the type of thing where you're like, no, this type of actor is going to have an Oscar and we're going to just give awards to people that do stuff like this. It needs to happen because this type of performance has to be regarded. It needs to be praised properly.
Well, all that praise and all that smiling that Aubrey did, I'll tell you what, nobody was smiling watching Lady in the Water in 2006. Let me tell you, M. Night's finest. I think this is when James gave up on M. Night Shyamalan, if I remember correctly. They didn't pick the best M. Night Shyamalan movie to be in, I'll say that.
I've never seen this movie.
Dudek number 4.
Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer. He plays the Silver Surfer. Was dubbed over by Lawrence Fishburne.
This movie's an abomination. I watched this movie and I've never seen the Fantastic Four, the original. I've never seen that one, so I just watched this one because I'm like, I know these movies are terrible, so I don't need to watch them. It's jarringly bad.
I would have never guessed it was him because it's such a physically imposing character. It doesn't really look like him. It doesn't really have any resemblance to him. But I also don't think the movie's bad because of the Silver Surfer. I think it just kind of wasted in it, to be honest. But
I think the Silver Surfer of it was probably the most interesting part about it.
I agree.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because I wanted to see Doug Jones do stuff. It's also, as soon as Lawrence Fishburne started talking in that voice, I was just like, what? The Doug Jones of it, I think, is the most, from a performance standpoint, the most compelling.
Mm-hmm. And he talked about how devastated he was by the choice to dub. And after this point, he wrote into his contract that he cannot be dubbed again. Like, they have to use his voice. Yeah.
He's earned that leverage for sure.
I mean, I see what they're going to have someone with a level of gravitas in their voice. But being as I've never actually heard this man speak, I don't know what kind of gravitas he has in his voice. So maybe it would have worked, but it ends up not working at all because the voice doesn't match the character in any way. They should have just let him do it.
Somebody didn't watch Mystery Men. That's what I'm hearing.
He's good. He's got a really good vocal delivery. That's what's crazy. It's not like he's Terrible.
Did you watch What We Do in the Shadows? We'll get into that in a little bit. You can hear him plenty in there.
Oh.
We're going to get to that. It's the last one.
The performance he gives in Jack Frost 2 tells me that he can do anything. But I didn't want to like speak too much out of turn because that was the only one I had seen. So,
and then the other one we'll mention here is Hellboy 2, which you mentioned earlier, which his character gets an extra arc, romantic arc as the fish creature, which will lean into another Guillermo del Toro project.
foreshadowing.
Exactly.
Well, Guillermo reached out to him and said, come be in Hellboy 2, and I promise we will force them to let you voice it yourself and not overdub you. So
Redemption.
And he's great in it. It's so good. Yeah.
Yep. Were there any issues with people going, it's a different voice? Or did people not care?
No, it's really good.
Okay.
He's a phenomenal character in that. I think he's pretty beloved. So
all this great conversation we're having, then we're going to run into the lowest critic score, which is the film that Case mentioned earned, what, $31,000? Case, I believe is what you said, right?
Yep, $31,000.
Super Capers, he played Agent Smith #1. This is our lowest critic score, and James has it.
Update to that, it's earned $31,003.99 because I had to pay for this bad boy.
I'll update my records.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I come on here and I try to defend some poorly reviewed movies because I feel like sometimes people get piled on and it becomes like hip to hate movies because there's like a rage clickbait thing tied to it. So it's like, if a movie's not good, it has to be horrific. And I don't agree with that mindset. But this movie is horrific. Super Capers is 6% critic score, 14% audience score. Came out in 2009. It's written, directed, financed, and starring Ray Griggs. He put his own money up for this. It's a superhero parody comedy movie that doesn't actually parody anything. It kind of just like recycles pop culture references, and it's not funny. And so it's like, it's a parody movie of parody movies that were popular at this time. So think like Scary Movie, but the worst versions of it. So like Date Movie, or the movie that already exists, Superhero Movie. This movie is like a slapstick kind of comedy in the vein of like Looney Tunes style humor with like fart jokes. So you think it's tailored towards children, which, you know, then it becomes a little harder to review. But then all the pop culture references it makes are definitely for kids who would find Looney Tunes funny right now that they wouldn't understand at all. So it's like, it's a kid movie that has funny sound effects and fart jokes, but it makes jokes kids don't understand because it's about movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And those jokes their parents won't laugh at. So I don't know who this movie was for. Doug Jones plays a parody of Agent Smith from The Matrix. He plays Special Agent Smith, #1, and the #1's important. He's one of the agents that is investigating the protagonist. He's obvious play on The Matrix, but again, probably a reference a lot of the kids won't understand. And he's got one joke in it, and it's that he shows up with his identical twin, Agent Smith #2, who's played by a black man with a cartoonishly deep voice.
Okay.
So you get the joke? They can't be twins.
Okay.
Doug Jones is a tall, skinny white man. Get it? That's the joke. I think this movie and everyone who did this, it was laundering money for tax evasion reasons. It just doesn't really make sense. I don't understand. And so instead of going through the plot, which I think is irrelevant, so I side with the critics, and I think it's one of the worst movies I've watched while I was on this podcast. I don't understand what he was going for with this movie, and it sounds like my assumption is Doug owed someone a favor, because there's a lot of people in this movie.
Yeah, I'm looking at the list, man.
Shouldn't be in it. It's bad, dude. It's like
Tommy Lister is in this. John Polito.
Oh yeah,
Michael Rooker is in this. Clint Howard, Tom Sizemore. Like, those are all actors we're going to cover later. We're going to ding on their Munson Meter scores.
Don't watch it. I gave him the extra $3.99 that he needs to get out of his legal troubles. You don't have to do the same.
Thanks, James. All right, so 6 more years before our last review. First and foremost, you have Legion. Case mentioned earlier with Tyrese, played Ice Cream Man.
you need to see Legion.
I really enjoy this movie. And Stephanie, I'm glad it feels like we have the same tone. So that makes me feel better and safe to share my thoughts with you guys. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. And ironically, when you told us that we were doing Doug Jones, this was the first movie that I thought of because his character is very jarring.
I've seen a clip.
The gang of ghouls or whatever they are show up at this diner. It's jarring, his character is.
Yeah, he said it was really interesting because he finally got to do a role where he shows his face. He looks normal for like a half second, and then they make him look really insane.
Mm-hmm.
But that's such a fun, like, visual gag to see him be just like, oh, because I think they make a comment, oh, this guy's not so bad. He's fine. And then that mouth drops open, and they're like, oh, shit. Yeah, it's real good.
Anybody else rewatch The Watch with Ben Stiller, Jonah Hill, Vince Vaughn? He plays Hero Alien.
He's so weird.
A couple big TV shows there. 2013, Sons of Anarchy, and then does The Arrow and The Flash in 2015, an episode of each of those three.
Yeah, that Sons of Anarchy really stands out in his projects because that doesn't line up with hardly anything he's done.
No, he played a prison guard, it looks like.
Okay.
A law enforcement.
Very different from anything that he's done, but obviously this was a really good show, well received, went on forever.
Mm-hmm.
Getting on there is probably a really cool thing for him.
2015, a movie that I think a lot of people find to be pretty underrated, and that is Crimson Peak. He played Edith's mother and Lady Sharp with Jessica Chastain. This is Guillermo again, isn't it?
Yes.
People love Crimson Peak.
It's so good. It's so underrated.
His character, super creepy again. Cannot tell it's him. Our last review is going to be Ouija, Origin of Evil, the movie that Aubrey said, nah, I'm good, dog. Joke's on him. This is a Mike Flanagan project, and I love Mike Flanagan. If you don't know who Mike Flanagan is, he's the mind behind the horror masterpiece Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, Midnight Mass, Midnight Club. Mike Flanagan is a modern-day horror genius.
Yes.
I saw Mike Flanagan and I got really excited because I love what he does. And I knew almost immediately it was a Mike Flanagan project because in the first scene, you see Elizabeth Reeser, Lulu Thomas, and Henry Thomas. And I was like, oh, those are all the actors that he works with. Kate Siegel's in this very briefly as well. Kind of lay the land with Ouija, Origin of Evil. So I have not seen the original Ouija. Don't hate me. It's got an 83-58 split on Rotten Tomatoes. The concept is that in 1960s California, a fake medium, her daughter tries to communicate with her late father through a Ouija board, but unleashes a demon instead. Basically, she figures out her daughter has these supernatural powers, starts to exploit her labor, and then bad things happen because of it. Doug Jones plays the creepy demon who uses this little girl to cross into our realm. I mean, the demon is present for the second half of the film, but you really don't see the demon very often. You see him in kind of the first introduction, but beyond that, it's more of an ominous being that's kind of inhabiting this young girl. But basic concept is that their house was used for these really awful experiments, or after World War II, and it's filled with a bunch of terrible spirits. So a lot of the same themes and imagery of Haunting of Hill House, of just a house containing spirits and why they're trapped there and things like that. Basically, these spirits have been watching this family for years and manipulating the family through the medium powers of this little girl. If you've also seen Oculus, there's some similar themes there too, and that's another Mike Flanagan project. So not a lot of Doug Jones in this, but interesting enough to watch because of what Flanagan does behind the screen, and also because he's an editor, what he's really good at professionally. So he brings that to his directing, and I always really appreciate that about Mike Flanagan. So
you mentioned not having seen the first one, and that's totally fine because the first one is absolute garbage. This is when Mike Flanagan really, I think, kind of burst onto the scene, and people were like, oh my goodness, he's one to watch, because he took this terrible movie, made a sequel to it, which you expect sequels to be even worse than the original.
Mm-hmm.
The sequel somehow is leap years better than the original. It's really disconnected from the original, and it's so much better. It's so good. And I think that everybody expected it to be horrible. And they're like, why are they making a sequel to this garbage film? And then it ends up being this really great horror film.
Why do you think the critic gap is there, Stephanie, of just being so high with critics and kind of mediocre with audiences?
That's a great question.
Do you think there's still a burn from the original Ouija, and people are like, man, I don't care who you are, you can't make this franchise any worse or any better than it already was?
Maybe, yeah. Sometimes audiences just don't know what's going on. I don't always trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Not that critics are always right either, but yeah, sometimes audiences just don't get it.
You don't get a ton Doug Jones in this, which is kind of sad because I like seeing Doug Jones on the screen. Let's kind of round this thing out. We've got 2016 to present. The first one there is a big one, though. He's done a lot of film and one episode pieces. He hadn't really done any long form TV shows until Star Trek Discovery. Played Saru for 60 episodes between 2017 and 2024. What a cool moment for his career to step into a world that he's always adored, being a pop culture nerd since he was a kid, and being in roles that required makeup and monsters. And he finally got to step into one of the biggest franchises possible for that.
I'm not a Star Trekkie trekker. Trek?
Trekkie.
But
Tricky.
You know how I know you're not a Trekkie? Because you said I'm not a Star Trekker.
They're tricky.
and I enjoy the movies and I enjoy the TV shows. It's just amazing how wildly popular this is. It never seems to die down.
I think it had a lot to do with the fan base being willing to allow the creators to take chances, which is not what you could say for Star Wars. Like with Star Trek, it's like, yeah, we did this, and this, and some of this worked and some of this didn't work. And, they're trying different things. When that happens with Star Wars, you're like, hey man, this episode sucked. And everyone's like, you suck. And with Star Trek, it's like, hey, this episode sucked. It's like, yeah, we took a shot. They're not all great. What can you do? Like, it's a completely different mindset of the fans.
Yeah.
Yeah, he played like a new species in this season too, which I know he's excited about. And I also saw in an interview that he negotiated with the team to make sure that even with his makeup on, it still resembled him. That was important to him as well if he was going to be on the show. All right, let's go to the movie that earned him a for-year consideration, Best Actor billboard in LA during Oscar season. That's his role as Amphibian Man in The Shape of Water, another Guillermo project.
I also prepared a 4-page essay on this film, so if you'll allow me.
By all means.
Let's do it. Yes.
I kid, but easily I could. Holy shit, this is a good movie.
I'll give my dad, it's almost 4 words review of this movie because he said this to me and it cracked me up. And so I was excited to actually watch it. When this movie came out, it was getting all the hype. Him and my mom saw it, and my mom was raving about it. I'm like, Dad, what'd you think? He's like, woman has sex with a fish, James. It's ridiculous. Fucking lost it. It's like, oh man, the nuances of the story seemed like they were lost on part of the crowd.
The funny thing about that, James, is I read in an interview that Del Toro was telling him that he had to play this role sexy.
Yeah.
He had to play it in a way that it was convincing enough that a woman would want to be with him. So, and he pulled it off. He was a sexy beast in this role.
I absolutely thought way higher of it than he did. Do I think it is on the same level of Pan's Labyrinth? No, I do not. But do I think it's a good movie? Yeah, I do. I think it is a good movie. It's one of those movies that's like a little more quirky and fun than you expect it to be. I think Richard Jenkins helps with that. I think his character is funny and brings like a levity to it where it's like kind of dark, and Michael Shannon is like the darkest of darks, and so that part works well. It was a more enjoyable watch than the type of movie that I expected it to be, where it was like way too heavy on the allegories that someone like my dad's brain just turned off and he couldn't actually figure out what was going on and got so frustrated. But I did not get that. And I also, again, like classic Guillermo, it's like incredibly visually stunning for a movie that's like mostly filmed in a bathroom or mostly filmed in an apartment.
I think this is a trend that's becoming troubling in terms of the Oscars, in which this movie, I think, would have been better served not winning Best Picture, because the memory of this movie makes it worse than it is. The way I've heard some people and some critics talk about this movie in retrospect is disappointing. I was even nervous to rewatch it because I loved this movie when I first saw it. I love this movie even more. This is a beautiful movie. It's what I love about Guillermo del Toro. He can take something like this and make it beautiful. And while Doug Jones will get a ton of praise on this for this role, as he should, great work, Sally Hawkins is a beast in this movie. She's so good.
Yes.
They both have to convey all the emotion without a single word.
It's just really strong act for the type of acting that personally I really enjoy, which is just big emotion and big ideas conveyed really subtly. This movie is just right up my alley in terms of that. And then there's really creative visual ideas. The music is just
gorgeous.
So good. It's so lovely. Mm-hmm. But I almost wish that it didn't win the Oscar because I think it would have had a much stronger life on the internet without it.
The non-cinephile is always going to criticize it and criticize the Academy that it won, even though it fully deserved to. But this doesn't have mass appeal.
Yep.
He knows he'll never get an Oscar, but he said just having a billboard with his name on it for your consideration for Best Actor, that was his Oscar. He was like, and I don't know if he, at the end of the day, he can say that. Whether or not he really feels it is a whole different story.
Mhm.
But at least that's what he tells the world. That's like, hey, I got that and I feel good. I think he's settled with that idea. I'm sure he would want more recognition, but he's not going to do well in our Munson Meter scores for winning awards.
But what I love about it, just in terms of like the conversation, or more so less the conversation, but the role, to me, him having a role like this uniquely fits his skill set in a way that like this movie couldn't exist if Doug Jones doesn't exist as an actor, is a beautiful story in and of itself. Like, it's a beautiful reward for the hard work that he should get, because, Pan's Labyrinth should get him that type of recognition as well. And so it's like, look, we found something for you. We found you this director that uniquely fits your skills and can help pave out a career for you. And then in the midst of that, you get a leading role. Now go be in this really beautiful romance that will allow you to showcase your abilities at full force, is a really beautiful story in and of itself.
A movie that won Best Picture with a leading man who doesn't say a word, who is a creature. Like, that's incredible.
But he was sexy.
That's the key takeaway. Sexy.
I was totally in, and the one part I found jarring is when he eats the cat. I was like, didn't need that. Felt gratuitous in my mind as a cat lover, I was just like, in case you're wondering, he's still a wild animal. I was like, I didn't forget. I just didn't need him to eat the cat.
All right, he played the Bye-Bye Man in Bye-Bye Man in 2017.
This is one of those horror movies where you see the reviews are horrific, and you go and you check it out and you go, oh, yeah, this is just people deciding they no longer tolerate B-level horror movies. I thought it was fine.
Yeah.
Is it a great movie? No. Is it a fine movie? Yes. It is one of those like Final Destination, but we want to make it maybe less fun and campy and more dark. And so instead of it getting a cult classic following, it gets one of those people where it's like, oh, yeah, it was okay. And people moved on. He plays titular character of the Bye-Bye Man, which is essentially like the boogeyman. But what I found fascinating about this is my wife and I are huge fans of Survivor, and we've watched like every season since quarantine, and with strategizing and favorite players and stuff. And people always have like the most cartoonish job titles on there where I'm like, this person clearly made up their fucking job. Like, this is just someone who told the producers like, oh, I'm the curator of vibes. Be like, sure, whatever. Like, that's not a real role. And one guy who was a really good player said he was a writer and never thought anything of it, but definitely thought he was a great player on Survivor. And then watching Bye-Bye Man, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, there he is. I'm like, oh, shit. What is Penner doing on screen? And then I look at it, it's like, oh, he wrote this movie. I was like, God damn. I was like, he actually was a writer. That's crazy. He's a great Survivor competitor, but he wrote Bye-Bye Man.
That's really funny.
Penner wrote this movie?
Oh, dude, you watch Penner too? Yeah, he wrote Bye-Bye Man.
Dude, I love Survivor. I've seen like every season of Survivor. Penner's like one of my favorites. He wrote this movie. I thought the same thing as you. I'm like, Penner don't write shit.
He's actually in the movie. He's the guy who works at the Menards they go to, like the plant shop.
Yo, do I gotta watch the Bye-Bye Man now?
Yeah.
Well, Carrie Ann Moss and Faye Dunaway are both in it too. So you got some extra nuggets in there as well.
Yeah, they do little stop-by cameos.
This was at that same time when Slender Man and a bunch of those other internet-based urban legends were on fire in the studios, where I'm sure we're just racing to try to tag in on some of these movies.
He does a bunch of stuff in here, but the last few that are notable, Hocus Pocus 2, many, many years later, the sequel comes out. That's how big the fandom was back as Billy Batherson. And then finally, the one that I'm love talking about. It's a show that I tell everybody. I've told you guys a bunch of times you should start watching. Hopefully you watched it, and that's What We Do in the Shadows. He plays Baron Afanas. The Baron comes from the old world. And in episode 1, he tells the vampires in Staten Island that they are not doing it right. You got to figure out how to take over the new world and the power seat that is Staten Island. And he's phenomenal in this show.
I can't say enough good things about it. It's hilarious. It's well written, and it's well written in like the creepy gothic setting, which makes it even funnier. It's like super dry, sarcastic humor.
He gets to do a whole range of makeup and like in and out of makeup. At one point, he gets to kind of be himself, like out of makeup, and then other times he's in like this really decrepit, over the top makeup. So it's really fun to see that.
I quote his character more often than I'd like to admit. I go, "You hide in the shadows I say it all the time, even when it doesn't apply, or I say whenever I'm tired, I go, I must slumber. Just like a part of my vernacular these days. So
good.
we're at the top of the mountain, though. Time to get into some top performances. Case, what'd you find? A guy with 187. There's got to be something out there.
Quite surprised at how many I found as we were going through the episode. What I like to do is I like to find a list as we're talking to help make sure that we have context to our list. So I found an article from CBR.com with the 10 best characters Doug Jones has played with full makeup. 1 comes from a TV show, 9 come from movies. This list was published January 25th, my birthday, 2022.
Can I guess the TV show?
You sure can.
Buffy.
Ooh.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
The gentleman.
Lead Gentleman is number
Yes!
10.
Okay.
So I was wrong. There's 2 TV shows on here.
So you're saying Star Trek Discovery is the other show?
According to this list, Saru, Star Trek Discovery, is number 1.
Trekkies Unite.
That's good.
3 Kings.
No.
3 Kings, where he plays a dead Iraqi soldier, is not on the list.
Oh, who would have thought?
Give me Hellboy.
Hellboy, where he plays Abe Sapien, is number 9.
Warriors of Virtue.
Warriors of Virtue, where he plays somebody, is
No.
not
So
on the
not on
list.
the list if you can't remember the character. Give me Hocus Pocus. Billy Butcherson.
Hocus Pocus, where he plays Billy Butcherson, is not on the list.
The Fawn.
The Fawn in Pan's Labyrinth is number 8.
Wow.
It should be higher, but
That is
This
interesting.
list is wild.
Yes, it is.
This list is wild. And I will tell you guys, there's a little bit of a wrinkle on this list that we've never dealt with before. So
How many have we
Ooh.
talked about? Did we talk about
keep
all
your
of them?
head on a swivel.
Shape of Water.
Now, this listed it as the asset in the shape of water at number 2.
Who named it? Michael Shannon? Is that Michael Shannon's name for it? The asset. How about Batman Returns?
Batman Returns, where he plays a clown, is not on the list.
not on this list. Can I guess Pale Man?
Pale Man from Pan's Labyrinth is number 7. Well done, Stephanie. That was the wrinkle.
Yeah.
So we're missing 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Wow.
Silver Surfer.
Silver Surfer from the Fastic 4, Rise of the Silver Surfer, is number 6. A lot of S's in that.
That's-
a lot of
that's
alliteration in that one.
That's disrespectful. It's above both from Pans.
Silver Surfer being over both Pan's Labyrinth characters is crazy.
Is this in order? Like, is this 10 to 1?
It said it, yeah.
That is nutso.
Crimson Peak.
Ghost of Allerdale from
Yeah, it's-
Crimson Peak is number 4. So we're missing number 3 and number 5. And now remember, this is his 10 best character Doug Jones has played with full makeup.
Give me Mimic then.
Mimic, where I don't remember what he played, but it was with F. Murray Abraham, is
Not on this
the
list.
Don't give him any character names, people.
What about he plays another role in Hellboy 2.
If you're referring to Angel of Death
Yes.
in Hellboy 2, you would be right at number 5.
All right. Last one is Legion.
Legion, where he plays Ice Cream Man, is not on the list. The last one we're looking for was actually one of our reviews.
James.
Ouija.
Super Capers.
No, I bet it's Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, isn't it?
Super Capers is not on the list, James, but thank you for participating. Ghoul Marcus in Ouija, Origin of Evil, is number 3.
Really?
And that rounds out the list.
But why? He's barely on screen.
Cannot be in order. That's the craziest list.
Was Saru, was that after Shape of Water?
It started right around the same time. They're both 2017. Ouija was 2016.
So this is chronological.
Oh.
So the most recent was listed at number 1, and the oldest being Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Lead Gentleman.
Nice.
Vindicated. All right.
And here, who we got the list from? Was it Magic Johnson who tweeted out this list with a fucking my favorite movies are in chronological order?
We can't be on the bad side of CBR.com. I got a feeling they carry some weight in the comic book world.
Well, let's get into the Munson Meter. What we do, we rate every actor on a scale of 0 to 100. based on a variety of factors. It could include anything from longevity, project choice, pop culture impact, acting range, awards footprint, any other talents they might have, their personal life, comedic chops, box office success, or anything else that matters to us as Munsons. And this time, Case has the honor of going first.
More than an honor, it's a privilege. And it's also very difficult to do with this particular performer. I think I'm going to focus in on just two things. One, I've always given a lot of credit and a lot of weight to what I would consider trailblazers. And we talked earlier tonight about the fact that he had no comparison. And so that meant he also didn't have anybody to chase. And he didn't have anybody to make mistakes that he could learn from. And I just think that's really, really cool. Another thing I want to focus on is the fact that I always love when we get high-profile directors that do a lot with the same actors. And I think about all the different people Tarantino does movies with. And I always just think that's really cool because it helps me believe that relationships are still important and that you can have a good career if you build good relationships with other people. I think this guy is in a league of his own, and so it's tough to compare him to everybody else on our list. But with all those being said, and just the wildly impressive I am with his acting ability and his ability to portray emotion and carry a message without talking, he's off the charts. So I'm actually going to give him what I think is a pretty high score of an 85.
That's pretty good. I love the fact that we do this podcast. We have a Halloween episode every year, and we talk about all these horror films and all of the creatures and all those things. And this time around, we get a chance to talk about the actor who inhabits many of the creatures in these stories.
Yeah.
And I think it's a forgotten element. It's an element that people take for granted. I think it's really cool we get to talk about this. There's a lot of stuff I like about Doug Jones. First off, bonus points for the fact that he's from here in Indianapolis, and I played baseball where he went to high school. I think that's a fun little connection. I think he's genuinely one of the nicest, kindest, most humble, grateful humans I've seen. We've covered in 108 episodes. Again, some of that is by circumstances, but it seems like because no one recognizes him, he gets to live kind of an average Joe life, as opposed to his other actor friends that get stopped in public. I can't imagine, other than like super fans that would go to conventions.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people probably recognize Doug Jones. He probably lives a semi-normal life, which has got to be really nice and refreshing. Clearly, he's a legend. Guillermo pairs with him. He speaks so highly of what he does. He seems to lack the ego that other actors carry in that world. He's been in his share of stinkers, but I also don't think he cares. He loves the craft and the fan bases that come with the films that he's in. Again, more bonus points for being in What We Do in the Shadows. Challenge for mine, right, is, does he have a ton of range, pop culture awards? Not really. Like, he's going to take a huge hit in those areas for me, but I still really enjoy him. I'm not going to give a score as high as Case. I'm going to give him a score which I think is pretty fair given the work he's done in his niche, but it might sound terrible compared to Case, and that's a 65.
Oof.
Stephanie, you are up.
Yikes, I have to follow that.
I said all the nice things.
I really feel like we're doing the Lord's work here because we get to talk about a brilliant performer that people love and don't know they love. Most people don't know who this man is, but he's been in so many films and so many performances that are iconic and that would not be the same film without him. I do think he's very versatile. I think he's wildly underappreciated. He's known for his exceptional ability to bring non-human characters to life through movement, gesture, and physical expression. I think no actor can play monsters as memorable and unique as he can. He's got a career spanning decades. He endures countless hours in the makeup chair to bring some of pop culture's most recognizable and strangest looking monsters to life on the big and small screens. He's brought a beautiful elegance to his characters with his background as a skilled mime and contortionist. He uses body language and gestures to express emotion underneath all his makeup. I think Del Toro said it best. He said of Jones, his physical movements are like an alphabet, and he creates poetry with that alphabet. And I think that's just a gorgeous way to talk about what he does.
Cool.
Through his collaborations with visionaries like Del Toro, he's brought to life characters that are deeply integrated into the thematic cores of their films. Without his nuanced performances, many of these creatures might have remained simply visual spectacles rather than emotionally resonant beings. In The Shape of Water, for instance, his portrayal of the Amphibian Man turned what could have been a monstrous creature into a figure of empathy, tenderness, and love. It earned him and the film critical acclaim, solidifying his importance not just as a performer, but as a key contributor to cinematic storytelling. I think his career deserves celebration not just for his individual achievements, but for expanding our understanding of what acting can be. He's more than just a creature actor. He's an artist whose work transcends physicality to touch the emotional and psychological depth of his characters. I'm going to give him a 90. I just think that there's no one else like him, and I think that deserves, incredible recognition.
Yes.
it's really hard to follow, and you absolutely crushed your review there, as you always do. So I will, unfortunately, my score won't be as high, but it's not because it's a negative on him. It's because I can't think of a way in which I can fairly grade someone who's like the greatest specialist of all time. Like Devin Hester is in the Hall of Fame, and we all agree deserves to be there, but he was on a bunch of crappy teams, it's like, and like with Doug Jones, it's like, he is great at what he does. He's probably the greatest at what he does, but it's like, when comparing him to other actors, it's just like apples and oranges, and it makes me feel awkward, right? And so I will say this, I think he is tremendous at what he does. I think that a lot could be said about a 3-year career, successful career, when you barely speak in roles. That I don't know if that could be replicated to that level of success. And to be arguably the greatest to ever put on the prosthetics carries a lot of weight to it. And so the majority of my points are going to that. And I say this all in a positive light because my score is going to sound negative after that glowing review. But I promise my scores always sound more negative. For some reason, give lower scores, but I'm going to give them a 60.
Yeah. All right, Aubrey, round us out, baby.
Yeah, this part is torturous. I do long for the time that I was a guest and I could just be like, hey, whatever. Aubrey Plaza, 80. And so it's hard for all the reasons that you guys laid out. At the pinnacle of what he does, it's very high. What he does in The Shape of Water, what he does in Pan's Labyrinth, it's very, very high. Great work. He's a really good actor. To be able to pull off the stuff that he's able to do, that he's a really good actor. The specialist part that James brings up is a great analogy because it seems this is the only thing that we really get to see him do. And that makes it tough to score. And so for me particularly, it makes it even harder because a lot of what he does is reliant on a lot of other things working well. In Pan's Labyrinth, a lot of other things have to work well for that character to come off the way that it does. And he's able to elevate it with what he does. It seems like you get his best work when he's with Guillermo del Toro, which is unsurprising, but it does kind of matter in this situation because when he's outside of that, I didn't see a ton of stuff that was great. He's really good. I love what he does. He's someone that should be honored in all of the ways that you can honor a guy like this. But I'm in line with the other people who struggle with ranking these things because of what they've ranked in the past. And I'm going to say he is coming in at a 62.
That's going to give...
Only 2 sane people here tonight, but the rest of you guys, you'll get there eventually.
That is going to give Doug Jones a 72.4. which puts him in 56th place, so about 40 spots ahead of his box office score. And that ties him with Jaimin Hansu, which is an interesting comparison.
Academy Award winner.
That's right. Just behind Jennifer Lopez and just ahead of Chaz Palminteri.
Razzie winner.
You guys have Doug Jones behind Jennifer Lopez?
Yep.
This was before the Diddy stuff came out, so we didn't know of any criminal potential wrongdoings.
The record, I would have lowered the J-Lo score.
Well, it's before your time. So Aubrey, what's he got coming? Based on what I could see, a lot.
He's got a ton, which isn't surprising. What's also not surprising is it's kind of a mixed bag of what it actually is based off of who's in it. He's in Nosferatu, but not that Nosferatu. He's in another Nosferatu, which I just think that that's interesting. So I'd want to see that.
Yeah.
He has a couple of movies with people that at one time were people that I was interested in seeing in movies. One of them is called Operation Taco Gary's, which is a comedy. He plays Elder. Brenda Song is in this movie.
Okay.
Jason Biggs.
And I didn't know Brenda Song was still alive. Simon Rex is in this movie also, which he's the most interesting to me. But that's just like a weird mixed bag of people that were really all popular at one time. Along the lines of Brenda Song, but a few years earlier than that, he's got another movie called The Weight of Darkness that has Jamie King in it. I didn't know that she still made movies. But really, this is kind of what it is. Just a mixed bag of like horrors, thrillers, and comedies, of which he has 13 in development or in production, and 11 of them are in production. So Doug Jones is someone that we will see in some form or fashion a lot.
Yep. Aubrey, the Nosferatu you talked about is directed by David Lee Fisher, and he's the same director that did the movie that I covered tonight. So that's interesting that they're working together again.
Yeah, it is. What's unfortunate is that movie will probably get buried. The Robert Eggers one, I am as excited for any movie as I am for that one. That one's going to be a big deal.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right, next podcast is going to hit November 7th. We're bringing back Laura Beneke. She was here for Gary Cole, Bonnie Hunt, Jennifer Lopez, aforementioned, Jim Belushi, and Mila Kunis. The Wheel selected one of these 5 actors, and then she decided to come join us for the actor. Always make it clear.
I looked at these 5 actors, and I've been waiting for this moment all day.
Oh, that's right.
So 5 actors, right? Daniel Day-Lewis, Ving Rhames, Michelle Williams, Alex Skarsgård, Leslie Ann Warren. We know who Aubrey wants, and her name is Michelle Williams. So I'm interested in other people's opinion.
Yes, everyone give your opinion about how you would like to do a podcast about Michelle Williams, please.
I think Daniel Day-Lewis has like 5 total movies, and it's because he's the strangest cat on earth, and I find that the most fascinating. I would love to learn more about this oddball that is a goat of acting.
I'm going to spend a lot of time in the IMDb trivia for that episode.
Oh my God, please. I'm going to find out stuff like currently hasn't spoken in 2 years because he's preparing for a role as a mime.
He's coming out of retirement. He's coming back.
Shadowing Doug Jones to learn how to become a mime. He continues to run into invisible walls, so he doesn't go anywhere.
We're just going to talk about how resilient that man's wife is to deal with that lunatic.
Could you imagine? It's like, oh, family's coming over for Thanksgiving, but my brother's not going to be here because he's pretending to be Abe Lincoln. You're like, what? What's going on?
In my heart of hearts, Michelle Williams, because I'm Team Aubrey.
My God.
Based on the profile she's building here, even though he's not from Chicago, he was very prominent in the same era as those guys, and I think it's Ving Rhames.
Ooh, okay.
And I'd love a Ving Rhames episode. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
We can talk about the underrated gem, Undisputed.
Oh, yeah.
Or the very talked about and very appreciated gem, Con Air.
Oh, love Con Air.
Somehow in a movie of scene stealers, he steals every scene he's in Pulp Fiction.
Oh, yeah. Ving Rhames is excellent.
Yep.
I'm good on Leslie Ann Warren, and I think Alex Skarsgård might be a little young for what I would like to cover. Like, I feel like he needs more time.
Which Skarsgård is that?
He's the one that is always like, hurting people in his movies.
He was in that shitty Tarzan movie.
My wife and I joke about this all the time.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Listen.
He plays the abusive husband in Dirty, what's it called? Big Little
Everything.
Yeah, so
Big Little
whatever
Lies,
that.
but also everything else.
Yeah.
I'd like us to not get too far away from this. Michelle Williams is the answer, though. That's what we all actually want.
Yes.
Blue Valentine? Is that what I'm watching?
No one has to come in. I'll just do this one on my own.
It is Venom Last Dance time, so I mean, what better time?
I'll make sure if it's Michelle Williams that it's the most I have to say just to force Kyle to have to edit out everything Aubrey has to say.
It'll be an 8-hour podcast recording.
Oh, God. Steph, if you were going to come back for a non-Halloween horror-themed episode, what are you picking out of these 5?
Michelle Williams is a great pick. You're going to watch some really good stuff. I am a Skarsgård fan, so that would be really fun for me to talk about Skarsgård.
Yeah.
Although I don't know that he's got a varied and diverse enough filmography to really get into.
I heard Michelle Williams, which is great.
You did hear Michelle Williams. That's a great pick.
Great.
She's phenomenal.
It's great. We're all in agreement.
Are we?
Get your goons and make it happen, Kyle.
I'll talk to the goons, but the wheel decides. I don't decide. So, well, Stephanie, we've made it. You've been fantastic as always. We gave you somebody that sounds like has kind of filled your horror heart. This is obviously the end of the episode where you get a chance to plug what you got going on. Wise words for our audience. It's kind of floor is yours.
Morbidlybeautiful.com. That's my website. We're always doing a lot of cool stuff over there, so I would love if you would check it out. Been doing a lot with Guilty Pleasures podcast and having a lot of fun. We also do a podcast called No Notes. It's a spinoff on that. And that's where we sort of do what we do here and talk about films that really changed our lives that we think are just cinematic perfection. So that really fills my cinephile heart and makes me geek out and feel super happy.
I love it.
Love having you.
Thank you.
Year 4 down.
Yeah, always a blast.
Everything you guys have over there is just so well done. You guys have a really good site over there.
Thank you so much. That's very kind.
All right. Well, as we wrap things up, you can find us on X, Munsons at Movies. You can find us on Instagram, Munsons at the Movies. You can email us, munsonsatthemovies@gmail.com. Any final thoughts from Doug Jones?
Silence! I must slumber. But when I awaken, we will rule this Staten Island. Yes!
Munson's out.
All right, let's go. Thank you for the education, gentlemen. We've just received a PhD in stupidity. Doctor, shall we?
This is your fate, Mr. Jones, my dear. Said the devil to dear Mr. Jones. You'll be loved by the millions and great at your task, but no one will see who is under the mask. Cover your face, Mr. Jones, my dear. It gets hot as hell under the foam. And like me,